as the Eagles and the Cowboys get ready, as we take a look back at what the Eagles did well last week and how they can implement that this week, Josh, because it might be a completely different game plan. You saw a Vikings team that had poor offensive line that I thought the Eagles were really able to exploit. They sent the blitz a lot because Sam Bradford doesn't move all that well. Well, this week, voila, you got a really good offensive line and a quarterback that moves. So it's almost a completely different game plan, you would think, from Jim Schwartz.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be very, very different than that Minnesota game. And what it's actually probably going to be similar to, hopefully for the Eagles, not the same result, but that Washington game, just in terms of the running style, and that's really what the Dallas run game, it's almost exactly the same, actually, as the Washington run game in terms of the zone blocking scheme, the things they like to do. Obviously, Washington's offensive line is good, but Dallas's is better. They obviously have a better running back in Ezekiel Elliott. So the big game plan this week is make Dak Prescott beat us. Even though the rookie quarterback obviously has done a great job for the Cowboys so far, really any statistical measure you want to look at, he's top 5, top 10 in the NFL. But he hasn't had a situation where there's been a lot of pressure on his shoulders or a lot of responsibility. So they're really going to have to focus. And you always want to stop the run every week, but put a little extra emphasis on it this week and try to make that rookie beat you.
Last week, Jim Schwartz did a really good game planning job. He did a good job of play calling. They sent the blitzes. They did something that they don't like to do, which is send the blitz. And this week, you just talked about it. They like to run the ball at Dallas, and they got that great offensive line. So what is Jim Schwartz, what is his game plan this time around? Does he send these run blitzes? Does he not use the blitzes much? Because against Washington, they got gashed because they didn't fill the gaps very well.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I don't think it's so much blitzing. I think the key thing is really just going to be playing disciplined football. That's the thing that killed them at Washington, was guys getting out of their gaps, either overrunning plays or not getting to the edge. And so that's something that really what it comes down to is gap discipline, and not so much blitzing or how much pressure you bring, but just guys playing within themselves, not trying to do too much. Brandon Graham, called it trying to play hero ball. Don't worry about, you don't have to make the play every single snap. Just do your job, be confident and rely on your teammates to do theirs. But discipline, that's the big word, the big focus this week for the Eagles is discipline against this scheme. Because if one guy gets out of their gap, then Ezekiel Elliott, one thing he does so well, he's a really good one-cut runner. So if you're get out of your gap, he can hit the pedals real quick, get into the hole. And Malcolm Jenkins said it best yesterday, I think. If you make a mistake against this team in terms of getting out of your gap, you don't have time to make up for it. So you really have to make sure you just play disciplined football.
Josh, you brought up Malcolm Jenkins, and he's one of the options the Eagles may go to with Ron Brooks now on injured reserve. What challenges do the Eagles have now that they're missing that piece and they have to tinker with their secondary again?
Yeah, well, the Eagles have, I guess, several options. They could move Malcolm Jenkins down there. One thing I'm curious to see is going forward, Ron Brooks, we don't know how long he'll be out for, but with, are they going to make C.J. Smith active for one of these games? But the most likely option, at least to me it seems, is Malcolm Jenkins sliding down there as the slot corner nickel situations, bringing in Jalen Watkins as that extra safety next to Rodney McLeod on the back end of the defense. And Jalen Watkins, it's been a small sample, but he has played well. And Malcolm Jenkins actually thinks that slot corner is his best position. That's his favorite position and how he thinks his talents can be best used. But the problem is the guys that he struggles more against are those smaller, quicker guys like a Cole Beasley, obviously, who he's going to face this week. Last year, now, I guess we don't know exactly how much it was Cole Beasley that gave Malcolm Jenkins trouble, because that Cowboys game is the game where Malcolm Jenkins played through the concussion. So who knows how much of an effect that had. But Cole Beasley crushed the Eagles last year in that game in Dallas. He had 9 catches, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. So Cole Beasley, even though Malcolm Jenkins is good as that slot corner, Cole Beasley is the type of guy that Malcolm Jenkins is more prone to struggle with. So he's really got to be physical with the line of scrimmage and try to disrupt the timing of his routes.
And a minute ago, you mentioned the Redskins game, and one of the knocks on the Eagles' defense in that game was their linebackers' inability to shed blocks and to get off of their blocks. Have the Eagles' linebackers turned a corner after the Vikings win?
To be honest with you, I don't know if you can say they've turned a corner until we see them play this game, because it's a much, much bigger challenge. I mean, that Vikings offensive line is just bad. I mean, you guys saw it. And so don't get me wrong, they obviously played very well, not just the linebackers, the defensive line, even the secondary in coverage. But this is going to be an entirely different beast. This is going to be probably the best offensive line they'll face this year, probably the best running back, and, not the best quarterback, but still a solid guy that Dallas has been able to rely on. And then you have Jason Witten, who can present some trouble and pass coverage for these linebackers with those option routes that he does so well. So this is really going to be a good test for the Eagles' defense, particularly the defensive line, not just the linebackers. Can the defensive line get some pressure and attack downfield and really cause some havoc in the backfield to help out the linebackers against the run and also the pass?
Hey, Josh, I want to bring up a name that has kind of been laughed at, kind of just poo-pooed to the side. But what role did Marcus Smith have in the game on Sunday? And is this the kind of game where he may have a more impactful role against this Cowboys team?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's completely valid. I wouldn't say, they won the game or anything because of him, but I do think it's valid to point him out because he's much improved against the run. Setting the edge. He had one nice tackle. I think, the Vikings only picked up a yard on the play. He did a nice job of setting the edge and then coming off off the block to make the tackle. And so, I think it's pretty safe to say that he's never going to reach the production that you expect out of a first-round pick. But I do think it's at least nice for the Eagles that they're seeing some improvement from him. The pass rush is obviously something that when Jim Schwartz came to town, that was the big, Marcus Smith can really get better because he'll be able to kind of get after the quarterback in that wide nine. But I think he's been much improved against the run too. So I don't think he'll have the biggest role against the Cowboys. Maybe you see him a little bit more than usual because he's improved against the run, and obviously that's going to be a big emphasis for the Cowboys is establishing that run, which is something Marcus Smith has done much better with this season. But I don't think, you'll see he'll still be the fourth rotational defensive end. He's not going to be a guy playing that many snaps out there.
All right, what about the rest of that defensive front against this Cowboys front? Because Benny Logan, who memory serves, Logan had really good games against the Cowboys in the last couple of years. If he's not in, that's a pretty big loss for them. But Fletcher, Brandon Graham, Vinnie Curry, this offensive line of Dallas, obviously very good. But this is a game where you got a lot of high-paid players on that defensive front for Philadelphia that they're going to have to, neutralize the Dallas line. Are they up for that task?
That's a great question. I mean, that's really going to be what decides the game is how well, these two lines, the Cowboys offensive line, the Eagles defensive line, the winner of that battle is probably going to be the winner of this game. The Cowboys offensive line is very good, but on the Eagles side of things, it really is a shame for the Eagles to lose Benny Logan because, obviously he's had success against them in the past, but he's also just been playing at a high level this season. And in that first half against Washington when he got hurt initially, he was probably the only player literally in the entire Eagles defense playing well that game, and then he gets hurt. But Bo Allen, he's no Benny Logan, but he has been playing well, particularly this last game against the Vikings. I thought he played well. So you miss Benny Logan, but you have a suitable replacement. And then, as you mentioned, you have Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham. Brandon Graham has been the best player on the Eagles through 7 weeks, and I'm not sure that it's even been that close. Now, obviously, Fletcher Cox won the NFC Defensive Player of the Month in September, but I think even then you could argue Brandon Graham earned it, and since then I think Graham has kind of widened the gap, and that's not a knock on Fletcher Cox at all. Obviously, he's played well, but Brandon Graham has gotten to the point where offenses really have to set their game plan around him. So you have these two guys, Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham, right next to each other, and you want to double team both of them. You want to double team maybe even another guy, Vinny Curry, coming off the other edge in pass rushing situations, or have a guy chip him. But you can only double team so many people and have so many guys into block. So is the Eagles' defensive line capable of beating up the Cowboys' offensive line? Absolutely. But the Cowboys are also capable of overpowering this Eagles' defensive line minus Benny Logan. So I think it'll be a very, very fun battle to watch.
Yeah.
And something that will be a pretty close battle, to be honest. I don't think there'll be a clear, one line dominates the other.
Just to throw a caveat, I thought that Jordan Hicks, really played his first, really efficient game as a as a 4-3 middle backer. I think people forget he excelled last year as that 3-4 inside guy and was making a lot of plays. But this is a little different, being the main middle guy. And I thought he tackled well and had his best statistical game and really probably played his best game as a middle linebacker. And Nigel Bradham, he's been a huge surprise in terms of the production. He seems like he is, and it's obvious he knows his defense, so he just always seems like he's around the ball.
Yeah, and one thing that Nigel Bradham does so well is just plugging the holes in the run game where maybe he's not going to make the tackle, but he'll blow up a blocker or really just clog the lane and force the running back into someone else's arms. And that's something that he mentioned specifically against this Cowboys offensive line, or the Cowboys run game, that the Eagles are going to have to do a better job. I mentioned how that Washington run game hurt them, which is similar to Dallas's. And Nigel Bradham said they have to get downhill a lot quicker, just move faster. And that's something that he does particularly well, is attacking, being aggressive, and just getting downfield. So he's a guy that really, no matter what measure you want to use, statistics, film, he's a guy that's definitely been I don't want to say he's definitely surprised me. I don't think he's surprised Jim Schwartz, because that's why he brought him in. But he has surprised me, and I think he's one of the guys that, we talk about Vinny Curry. He's not playing nearly as many snaps as you'd think for a guy making that kind of money, and other guys who aren't maybe playing up to their contract. But Nigel Bradham is one of those Eagles who's outplaying his contract so far.
Josh Paunil with us, talking Eagles football. And let's flip to the other side of the ball for a second, Josh. And the Eagles offense, they've only hit one play of 30 yards or more in the last 3 weeks. Any answers coming out of Eagles camp on how they stretch the offense and get vertical again?
Well, to be honest, this isn't the answer they're giving, but the reason for that is quite simple. I mean, they just don't have much talent to do that. You've had some opportunities, and the Eagles just haven't capitalized. I mean, the one that I guess comes to mind immediately is that play against the Vikings where Carson Wentz appeared to overthrow Nelson Aguilar, but Aguilar, even before there was contact late in his route, it just looked like he didn't really run as much as he needed to. What he said was that he was expecting the ball earlier in his route, so when he didn't get it, that's why he kind of slowed up. So there are small things here and there where, that could have been a big play for them that would have gone more than 30 yards, but they just don't really have much talent at receiver, and that's why you hear these rumors about, are they going to trade for Torrey Smith or Alshon Jeffrey? I don't think it does much to do with those two guys as it is the Eagles front office is not happy with the talent they have at receiver, and it's apparent when they play each week because they're just not getting that much out of them.
So when you watch the All-22, are these guys open? Does Wentz not see them? Are they getting separation? What do you see when you watch the All-22?
I guess particularly, the Washington game was the one game where I thought Wentz just wasn't hitting guys who are open. Part of it, I shouldn't say part of it, I think a big part of it was just that game specifically because of all the pressure he faced and how that affected him. But, I don't think it's a matter of Carson Wentz is constantly missing guys. I do think there are plays here and there where he can go elsewhere with the ball or make different reads. But I definitely think it's more so on the receivers and what they need to do in terms of creating separation and being able to stretch the field, take the top off of a defense. So, Carson Wentz is, here and there, you would like him to make some different choices, but it's definitely not, an overriding theme or anything that I would worry about.
All right, Josh Paunil is with us, and to kind of go off of that, because Doug downplayed the need for wide receiver help, right? I mean, we have guys. We have Huff. We've got Aguilar. Those guys can stretch the field. We don't need anybody else.
Yeah, and I thought it was funny because a couple points on that. First, when he was asked, it wasn't that day. I think it might have been a couple of days before that on Monday. He was asked, "Are you happy with your receivers?" And he paused for like at least 5 seconds. Like he did not know what to say.
Noted.
And finally, or no, I think the question was, "Do you need more out of them?" And eventually he said, "Well, we need more out of everybody," which was a very good diplomatic answer from Doug Peterson. But yeah, I mean, he mentions Josh Huff as a guy that's another thing I thought was funny. He mentions Josh Huff as a guy that can stretch the field, and then he talks about how well Josh Huff has done with the bubble screens. And it's like, well, if this guy is so good at stretching the field, why do you throw the ball behind the line of scrimmage every play? So, it's what he has to say. I don't blame Doug Peterson at all. He can't come out and say, oh yeah, Josh Huff, Nelson Aguilar, none of these guys are stretching the field. But it's definitely fair to say that the Eagles need a significant upgrade at receiver.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem that that's something that they are pursuing, according to Doug anyway. We'll see. Tuesday is the trade deadline. But also, he was asked about the lack of production from the tight ends. They only have a couple of catches over the last couple of weeks. And it seems like ad nauseum, Josh, we talk about, Zach Ertz, he's got to get more involved. But why that position in general isn't more a part of the game when they lack so many weapons?
I guess it's just I think recently I wouldn't blame the tight ends too much recently for their lack of production, because the Washington game, Zach Ertz, I thought that was the one game where Carson Wentz just really missed guys that were open, but I didn't really blame him because the pressure just kept getting to him. He didn't always have time to hit these guys. So with the Washington game, Zach Ertz was open. He could have had at least 50 additional receiving yards that game, but Carson Wentz just didn't have the time. And then more recently, especially this Vikings game, the offense as a whole just didn't play well. The Eagles' defense and special teams really made up for just a really not very good offensive performance by the Eagles. You have some success running the ball, but the Eagles only average 4.4 yards per play, which is not a good number. And then you just have the offense changing a little bit. I don't want to make too big of a deal out of it, but I do think Doug Peterson, which was smart, made some good and small adjustments. He's having Carson Wentz not take so many big 5-7 step drops to make life easier on Big V and make things easier for pass protection. But I really don't think it's necessarily, at least recently, about the tight ends as much as it has been about the offense as a whole. Now, if this continues, obviously that's something you definitely have to worry about, because with all the money that you gave to Zach Ertz, and you obviously gave Brent Selleck a new contract too this offseason. But for now, I wouldn't worry too much about the tight ends.
Yeah, that's a good point, that you paid these guys. You thought that they would be more involved, but so far not the case. But, Josh, my question for you really, can they be more creative with their running backs, and maybe more specifically Sproles, use him in different ways to get more creative with guys who maybe gives you more production?
I wouldn't. I think the creativity actually has been pretty good for this Eagles offense, given what they have. I guess particularly with what you're thinking about, I think with Darren Sproles, they kind of used Josh Huff as a guy that, because you think of Darren Sproles as a guy, we want to get him in space matched up against guys, and particularly in the last game, there were a few plays where Josh Huff got at least 10-yard gains, really because of the play drawn up by Doug Peterson, where they do a little motion across the formation, no one runs with him, so Carson Wentz just gives him a quick pass, and Josh Huff does what he needs to do in space to pick up some yardage. So I don't think the creativity has been that bad. I think it's just a matter of not much talent on this offense. I do think you probably could use Darren Sproles a little differently in this offense, maybe as a receiver a little bit more, but I wouldn't put too much, blame with that in terms of the offense's recent lack of production in terms of the creativity. I think it's just a matter of the talent level not being very high, and also having to adjust to sticking Big V in there at right tackle in place of Lane Johnson.
Josh, before we let you go, one narrative that seemed to come out of the press conferences this week was more discussion about Carson Wentz. Technically, I heard the word target line at one point. I heard throwing accuracy at another point. Are they starting to get worried about some of the things he's doing fundamentally?
No, I mean, I think some of that stuff has been a little bit overblown. I think what you're seeing from Carson Wentz, to be honest with you, is what I expected most of his rookie season to look what that Vikings game looked like for him. So to see that happen didn't surprise me at all against the Vikings. You know, the number one defense in the NFL. They faced some other good quarterbacks and made those other good established NFL quarterbacks look pretty bad too. So there are small things like the target line, making sure his hip opens up enough when he's throwing to the left side and that his feet are set and pointing in the right direction. But those are things that it's more of a matter of drilling in that consistency that comes with being a young player. So I don't think it's something they're worried about at all, to be honest with you. I think that's something that kind of the outside has made a little too big of a deal about. But, if I was a fan of the Eagles, I wouldn't worry about that at all right now in terms of Carson Wentz's fundamentals.
Josh has more over at PhillyMag.com. Birds 24/7. Josh Paunil, Eagles, and the Cowboys. Plenty more on this game throughout the day. And, of course, tomorrow on the show, Josh, of course, every week right here with a look at the Eagles. And 111 times they've played. It'll be Sunday night right here on 97.3. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks for having me, guys.